So we're going to go into panel discussion number 3, which is first develop and then manage. So managing your assets is kind of the theme of this. And our panelists this time, we have Jeff Lee from JL Architecture, I believe based in the Turks and Caicos. We have Chris Wells from Graham Thompson, based in TCI, also the Bahamas, and Jerry Dallas from TKCA Vacations, and Mark Gauss from the Cayman Islands. He's with RE/MAX Cayman Islands, but I know I'm kind of introducing you, but I'd like for each of you just to say a little bit about who you are and what you do.
For those of you who didn't hear my colleague speak this morning, Graham Thompson is the oldest and probably the largest firm in the Bahamas. We've now celebrating our 70th year. It's our 70th birthday. And we opened up an office in the TCI in Provo about 6 years ago. So we were predominantly a litigation-based firm, and then I moved down to Turks and Caicos, and now I've established the property group there. So my background is generally property conveyancing, corporate finance, resort developments. That's what I do. I do both work in the Turks and Caicos and in the Bahamas, so that's why Tim mentioned before, I'll be on this panel, I'll be discussing to a certain extent some of the similarities and maybe some of the differences between purchasing and investing in the Bahamas as well as the Turks and Caicos Islands, and you'll find out there are some similarities, but there are also some big differences as well. So thank you.
Jeff?
Good afternoon. Thanks to Ian and Gina for the opportunity here. Look, it's been great. Wonderful format. Stopped going to these things 15 years ago, but I find that this is a really great format for meeting people, interacting. I trained in Canada, ended up in Bermuda, eventually went to Turks and Caicos in the 80s, and mostly involved in condominium hotel development through the middle 90s into the 2000s, and we'll get into a few comments, I'm sure, here later about the opportunities Turks and Caicos, which I think are as strong now as they have been for many, many years. Turks and Caicos being a very, very resilient place, a place that seems to, in retrospect, as I look at it, be able to morph itself from economic climate to economic climate. A couple of comments on that later.
Okay, thank you. Mark?
My name is Mark Goss. I'm originally from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Spent university years in West Palm Beach. I'm a real estate agent at RE/MAX Cayman Islands. Just a little bit on the brokerage I work for, RE/MAX Cayman Islands, and also the Cayman Islands as a whole. It's 420 miles south of Miami. There's 65,000 people who live there. About half the population are expats, mainly from Canada, the UK, South Africa, Philippines, Jamaica, and the US. We are a wealthy, stable, safe jurisdiction. Our real estate market's absolutely booming right now, which I'll talk on later. And thank you, Ian and Gina, for this opportunity.
Awesome. Jerry?
Yeah, so my name is Jerry Dallas, and I'm the general manager of TKCA Vacation Rentals. And TKCA Vacation Rentals, that is the new company that stemmed out of the parent company, which is TDMG Construction. They have operated in Turks and Caicos since 1995 and built a very good reputation for themselves. So in the construction trade, they started to have a little play with some vacation homes. Did well, liked what they were doing, did some more for investors, and then got to a certain point where they had enough to do of their own work and hired me to do this work. So I think the island is doing very well in that regard. Currently we have 20 properties within the portfolio. This year alone we can stretch that to a further 20, and then we look forward to continued development thereafter.
Excellent. So what we're going to talk about really is we're going to talk about development process sort of from the ground up, literally, if you will. So I'd like to start with sort of the land portion of the development side, and then we'll get into sort of building, construction, development, and managing. I'll start with you, Jerry. So I'm from the Cayman Islands, as is Mark as well. By the way, Mark, I apologize for mispronouncing your last name a minute ago. In Cayman, Cayman and Turks have a lot of similarities, but one thing is different. Cayman has been, I guess, a little bit more established for a longer period of time, and we're running out of prime beachfront, if you will. It's kind of been developed, a lot of it, and in Turks, Turks is a lot more islands, but in particularly in Providenciales, which is the main island people know of because of the airlift there and all of those things. Is there still a fair amount of good opportunities to purchase waterfront land for development, whether it be resort or single-family luxury?
Chris will have to help me with this.
Okay.
I think there is, but again, the land is already owned by someone, so it depends what does that person want to do with the land. So certainly there's parcels of land that are not yet developed on. Some of it would be more suited to condominium developments and other more suited to, let's say, private luxury villas, etc. And that's maybe the Providenciales Island. There are many other beautiful islands, perhaps not as well developed, so lots more land opportunities. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, what Jerry's saying, Providenciales is the most developed island in the Turks and Caicos Islands. And even though that's not the capital, that is sort of now the Mecca. That's where the largest resorts are, the biggest resorts are going in. Ritz-Carlton, for instance, is a big name brand. It's actually one of the only name brands, I think actually it is the only name brand in the Turks now. And so that's along Grace Bay Beach. And Grace Bay Beach itself used to be the #1 beach in the world. I think we've got knocked down to second or third. I'm not 100% sure.
We now hold that ranking.
Oh, I don't believe you. But yeah, but along Grace Bay Beach, that's the most developed part of Providenciales. As far as opportunities along that beach, there are some vacant parcels available. As Jerry says, most of them are privately owned now. The prices for those are going up as more development is happening on the Grace Bay Beach. But for Providenciales itself, there are a lot of other opportunities, a lot of vacant parcel on the island itself, not necessarily on Grace Bay, but from the southern part of it. But I think what is happening now is there's getting more interest in the other islands of the Turks and Caicos Islands, especially if we're looking at, and the government is talking about putting more access as far as roads to get to these other islands. If that happens, then there's definitely a lot more investment opportunity with these other islands have a lot more property.
Okay, so there are some opportunities at least. So continuing in the same vein along, in terms of land goes, one of the things that I know a little bit about in Cayman is that there's developers have been able to, at least up until now, this may be changing soon, take advantage of a stamp duty loophole where even with condominiums, buyers can essentially effectively buy in advance land underneath the condominium and rather than having to pay stamp duty on a completed project. Maybe Mark, you can talk a little bit about that. I mean, there's been some challenges to that. Do you see that if that changes, is that going to have an effect on the development developers' potential in Cayman?
Sure, yeah, let me give you some background information on that, as well as I'd also like to speak to available land in some of our most high demand areas. So in regards to stamp duty is in Cayman the one-time tax that you pay on the property. There's no annual property taxes, but when you purchase a property, there's a one-time 7.5% stamp duty that's due at closing. You can't roll it into any mortgage or anything. So traditionally, when you purchase a property, you pay that at closing. However, there is a loophole that developers are using when they have townhouse type properties. So when they have townhouse type properties, they can actually close on just the land right there, and that land may be worth, say, $100,000. However, the stamp duty on that, 7.5%, say $7,000. Whereas when the completed product would be done, that sale price would be $1.5 million. So that would be nearly $100,000 in stamp duty. So obviously that's a massive difference. So what developers are trying to do, what they have been doing is saying, well, you can close on the land, pay stamp duty on that, then there's a contract for purchase. So the government has kind of allowed this to happen, but now December 31st, 2019 will be the end of when they're able to do that any longer. You're never able to do it on condos where there's someone on top of you, because technically, you wouldn't actually own that land, only with freestanding or attached townhouses. In regards to your first question that I wanted to touch on, available land. So 7 Mile Beach is our tourism hub. That's where basically everything is. Great Sandy Beach, that's our best beach there. Two areas that I wanted to mention. One was vacant land. It was actually owned by the Johnson & Johnson family. I believe it transacted for recently, say $40–50 million. That's going to be a development called Watermark. Super high end. It'll be the highest end luxury property in Cayman with pre-construction prices starting between $5.8 million and just over $22 million. So that's where basically one of the last stretches of land in 7 Mile, and they're building about 60 condos there. Another thing that we're seeing is redevelopment. So back 30 years ago, there obviously wasn't as much demand, and they had restrictions that you could only build up to 3 floors. Now it's up to 10 floors, possibly up to 12 floors. So what they're doing, that's a lot lower density, so they're doing something called redevelopment. So all the owners voted in, we want to be redeveloped, and now they're building an example of La Covia. It's a redevelopment project. 3 towers, it's going to be 10 to 12 stories. So that's one way of kind of accumulating land or being able to develop in a very high demand area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned that land sale. That's, we're seeing the 2 recent transactions, that one and the Royal Palm site, we're reaching a value of over $100,000 a running foot of beach frontage, which is insane. That just gives you an idea of the desirability for sites like that. Let's talk a little bit about construction costs. I'll maybe ask Jeff this question about Turks. In Cayman, we've seen construction costs rising, I think, to a certain extent, not because the cost of materials are going up or necessarily labor costs, but the contractors are so busy with construction being so popular right now. So, are you seeing construction costs going up a lot in Turks as well? And does it threaten the value feasibility margin? In other words, are costs starting to get to the point where new construction is becoming less feasible in terms of what the actual market value of the properties are worth once they're built?
Well, it doesn't appear to be.
Okay.
It seems like there's a balance that continues. Most recently, a condo hotel project that TDMG is building for us, for the client, where there's a balance between, obviously a balance between sales and cost. That wouldn't be built unless there was. You see the Ritz-Carlton going up. There's going to be a significant increase in cost per square foot for that project. So I think generally speaking, it's continuing to be increase in revenue side balanced by the increase in cost. Smaller projects, one of the benefits we have in Provo certainly is a surfeit of smaller builders that are capable, not the larger ones, but if you're going to build even a fairly large residential project, you have the option of going out and sourcing one of those smaller companies, lots of very capable Dominican companies, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if you have a feel for construction cost per square foot for luxury residential, but I mean, we're seeing in Cayman sometimes up to in the 500s per square foot US dollars.
Depends on where you are and how difficult it is to build. For example, Ambergris Caye, again, TDMG area, where I've done quite a bit of design work. You may be pushing, in terms of establishing a budget, $700 a square foot. In Provo, $500, $550. Although when we design, we typically want to work with a budget, not a cost per square foot. Mm-hmm. Cost per square foot, to me, is an illusion, because a kitchen costs much more per square foot than a living room does. So we prefer to work with a budget.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think what we're seeing happening, though, and Mark can talk about this too a little bit, is that contractors, developers, whether they're even just a single-family developer of a luxury home, you go out and speak to 3 or 4 different contractors, and they'll just eyeball it and say, you know what, they'll just say, I can build this for $400 or $300 a square foot or whatever it is, and then, then the project gets out of hand quite quickly because they haven't done their homework. Is that an issue you're seeing a lot with new construction?
Well, I definitely agree with what you're saying in regards to the builders are just so incredibly busy that they are quoting very high prices. It's not like the labor has increased or the materials have increased. However, the government fees have slightly increased. I referenced a recent article that our construction industry in 2016 grew 7.9%, in 2017 grew 7.2%, and in the first quarter of 2018 grew 8.5%. So yeah, construction prices are quite insane right now, and they're extremely busy. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So let's talk a little bit about getting projects approved and particularly for non-locals, for foreigners to come in and build, and maybe Chris, you can talk a little bit about in Turks and Caicos, what obstacles does a foreigner have to, if they want to build and actually multiple units? So if they want to build multiple units and either sell those units or rent those units out, in terms of, are there business licensing challenges with that for foreigners, or what goes on in Turks?
Yeah, and as far as the Turks and Caicos is concerned, as a foreigner coming in to do any type of developments or do something on a private level where you want to have a house, maybe different stories or different connections, and rent it out, you can do so. You don't actually have to get government approval to do that. The only thing you do have to do, if you're going to be renting it and getting an income, an annual income coming from that, is to get a business license, because essentially you are operating the business. But it's not a restricted business. It's not something that you would essentially have to get the government to give approval for as a foreigner. To give you a contrast, as far as the Bahamas is concerned, there's some level where when you do that, if you're going to be doing that, if you're going to be operating, sometimes you actually have to get government approval by way of a permit from the Bahamas Investment Authority with the intention of being a foreigner renting property. So that's to distinguish as far as the similarities. In Turks, you can just come down, you can buy, you can rent, you just get a business license. And then if you are renting on a short-term rental like Airbnb or VRBO, then you'll also be subject to essentially what their hotel tax is. But that's the only thing you will have to be concerned about. Whereas the Bahamas, there's an upfront level of approval that you would need to get in order to do that as a business.
Mm-hmm. And Jeff, are you seeing, is it fairly efficient and relatively quick to get sort of project approvals in terms of, we ran through a period in Cayman where it was taking a lot longer to go through, not just necessarily getting the building permit, but the inspection process done to keep construction on track. What's happening in terms of that?
In looking at other marketplaces, I would say that Turks and Caicos is absolutely no worse than most other markets. In some ways, easier and better. We have the opportunity to drive down the road and as I do, often drive into the planning department, go through the door and ask to speak with whomever, one-on-one. And frequently what we do with a project is interact with the planning people there ahead of time, show them a sketch, get them familiar with the project. And typically, we don't see even a condo hotel project that much difficulty, with the exception of the H2O project, which indicates how things change, where we did have quite a bit of trouble time-wise because of resistance with the local residential community. The association had objections. That added about 7 months, 8 months overall to run through all of those questions and objections to the original design. We ended up, I think we did maybe five iterations of the H2O project before it was cleared through the association. So there you go. That's a part of the change going on in Providenciales, which is different from even 5 years ago or 6 years ago.
Right.
You just have to be aware of them and put that into your planning. We had a very knowledgeable client who understood the impact. And that's just hunker down and keep going, keep working at it.
Right. Okay, thanks. So the next question I'll kind of direct to both Jerry and to Mark. Maybe we can contrast the differences between Cayman and Turks in terms of what types of financing terms are being are available for buyers, whether they be local residents or whether they be foreign coming in to purchase vacation homes or their own homes that they want to live in part of the time. I'll start with you, Jerry.
It's an easy question for me to answer because I'm going to have to consult my attorney.
Yeah, I was wondering how you would answer that question. As far as financing terms, you mean what's available coming in to get financing to purchase property in Turks and Caicos? The interesting thing about Turks is we pretty much have just three main banks, and they're all kind of Canadian banks that people use in the Turks and Caicos. It's CIBC, Scotiabank, and Royal Bank of Canada. Those are the main ones. As far as foreigners coming in, it's changed a little bit now because of all the money laundering regulations that are in place, and the banks obviously now have an obligation to be more diligent as far as their due diligence is concerned. Getting financing sometimes can be a little challenging as a foreigner coming in, especially if you're doing something for construction. If you're buying something that's already pre-built, like a villa, then for the most part, you're looking at, generally banks will be willing to lend you about 50% on the value of the property. As far as the interest and terms, for the most part, the banks will peg it generally to New York Prime, or you can get it to peg to LIBOR, but you're looking on average maybe now, I mean, this is just me speculating, I think around like 5.5 interest, like total, as far as what you can get from the banks now.
So maybe a point or so above prime.
Yeah, generally a point or two above prime. Seems to be where it is now, I believe.
Right. What are you seeing in Cayman, Mark?
So we have about 5 retail banks. We actually have those 3 that you mentioned, and then we also have Cayman National Bank and then Butterfield Bank. Butterfield Bank is a regional bank in the Caribbean based out of Bermuda. So if the property is going to be your primary residence, if you're living in Cayman, you can achieve up to 90% financing. Normally it's about a point over New York Prime, so I'd say maybe around 6%. 90% financing, you can get loans up to 30 years. If the property is going to be an investment property, either you're living on island and you're going to use it as a rental investment, or you live here in the States and you're going to buy a vacation condo, you can receive financing up to 75%. Banks view that as a little bit more risky, so they're not going to loan the 90%, and the interest rate might be maybe 0.5% higher. But it's not any issues getting financing in Cayman. We require evaluation, which sometimes the real estate agents and the valuators don't always see eye to eye on. However, there are some other options for my North American investors. One would be, say, a home equity loan, and then they wouldn't need a financing condition. That'd be a pretty strong bargaining position when making an offer. They could possibly also have a business loan. This is, in their home country. And then also for U.S. purchasers, they could do something called a self-directed IRA, where you can basically, instead of investing in mutual funds, you invest in foreign real estate. And then with that, it has to be a investment. So there's limited times you can actually stay in the property if you're buying it with a self-directed IRA. And we're also seeing tons of cash purchases. It really kind of depends on the segment of the market. If you're buying a 7 Mile Beach condo, over $1.5 million, it's normally a cash purchase.
Yeah, we haven't seen a lot of those go through the banks, have we? Not many of those.
7 Mile Beach condos?
Yeah.
I mean, you do, but then also our prices for 7 Mile Beach condos are kind of they're maybe a little inflated right now. They're quite high. There could possibly be issues with the valuation. Maybe the agreed purchase price would be $2 million, but the last sale could be 1.4, and then the bank would only want to loan around, say, 1.4, 1.5.
Right. Okay, thanks. So moving on a little bit into actual, getting some return on these investments in terms of rentals. Jerry, can you talk a little bit about, like, in terms of what sort of vehicles are most buyers are you seeing these days? Is it changing in terms of, are they sticking with the in-house rental pools? They're going to Airbnb, to VRBOs, or their own Expedia bookings? Or what type of vehicles are people using? And what's happening with the rental market?
So I'd say the majority of the condo developments, they have their rules, and they're obliged to go through the management company that has been appointed for that development. And they would be essentially run and marketed in the same manner that hotels have been to date marketed in. So using all the various channels, using all the available salespersons on the ground. Over the years, that has gone probably more from a people on the ground basis to more of a technology basis to more of the online travel agents, meta search engines, etc. So that's kind of the condo hotel model. Then on the more individual, let's say villas, vacation home purchases, etc., people get into those because they love the island or the location. They want to have a vacation home, and when they are not using it and enjoying it for themselves, they want to be able to make some return. So for some persons it becomes a hobby project, and they like to have a little play around with all the new very clever models such as the Airbnb, VRBO, the other HomeAway family channels, TripAdvisor, Flipkey, etc. So it's kind of made, it's very easy to make a hobby hotelier very quickly overnight, and technology has facilitated that. It's fun, it's wonderful, and it's kind of changed the whole dynamics of hospitality. So, since Airbnb, etc., has hit the ground, it has been revolutionized. So on an individual basis, you can do very well with those channels, but you have to be cognizant of the fact that it's going to take a little bit of time. So whilst it's a hobby project, if you want to lock down that booking, you need to have a good response time. You need to engage the correspondence with the guests. You have to tell them all about how wonderful it is. And it's a sales process. And persons love that, and they do very well at it, or other persons get a little bit frustrated with it and look for an option. Who can I give this to do it for me? And then that's where you may engage the services of a property manager. Property managers, there's many in Turks and Caicos, and a lot of good ones and doing a very good job. There's smaller ones, there's larger ones, etc. So where I would come in is we have a number of properties that we own as a company ourselves. A number of investors have brought them to us. Another group of existing homeowners who have had, they've got a little frustrated with their own management of the property, would say, can you do it for me? So our model is that we can handle, handle a volume or numerous inventory items and manage that professionally and successfully for the persons. Then which channels are we going to use to manage it? So we will certainly avail of all the easy ones, as I have described. We would like to create our own brand, our own presence, our own website, etc. And that's probably the least expensive channel. Of course, you invest in it initially, but as you get repeat customers, they're coming back to you at less the marketing cost, etc. The other part of the sales channel is the getting into the more luxury sites where persons like to list their homes and get guests through, albeit those channels, they are much more expensive. So everyone has heard of luxury retreats that has since been bought by Airbnb, and there's many other, very nice, glamorous villa-type luxury worded channels available, but they are commanding percentages, of 15 to 20%. So in your sales mix, you have readily available to you anything that may cost from 5% right up to 20%. So it depends. How do you want to do it? Do you want to take the easy way out, get a little bit of luxury look and feel up here, and these guys will produce for you, but it costs you more? Or do you want to put a little bit more time and effort into it and get more from these guys? Or better still, how do you combine the whole lot and create a sales mix and come in here with a number in the middle?
Right. So I guess you need to sort of be able to offer a lot of value adds as well, like I suppose concierge services
Yes.
and all of those things too.
Yeah. So a number of, let's say, the more expensive channels would package that in, and you would have a dedicated booking agent, etc., dedicated pre-arrival concierge, etc. But essentially, when it comes to on the ground, then these homes up here, they are beautiful, they are luxurious, and they command a high price. There is an expectation and an on-the-ground service that has to come with that. And that's probably where you get into the property management companies that try and look at themselves more as a luxury hotel with their inventory spread out in different geographic locations, albeit we have the capability of giving that level of service to guests. Many of the villas will come fully staffed from, let's say, private concierge to private chefs, private butlers, etc. And then a number of other properties are luxurious, and you add those in on an a la carte basis. So you don't need to keep a full complement of staff all the time, but as required and as your clients see fit, you can offer these services to them at add-on prices.
Okay, thank you. So Chris's colleague with Graham Thompson earlier was in the first session was talking about some legal challenges that had occurred in Turks and Cayman about condominium developments, the strata developments, being able to mandate that owners have to go through their own rental pools rather than self-rent and manage their properties. And I was thinking about that over the break, and to me, it comes down to the survival of the management company to be able to be financially solvent. I mean, I value a lot of hotels, and I think of hotels, for example, of having oftentimes a 15 or 20% profit margin. But if you're giving, say, 40 or 50% of your room revenues back to a separate owner, how do you maintain that sort of profit margin? And one of the things you have to do, obviously, is keep 100% of the units. If you lose some of those units to private or private rental, then it's harder for those management companies to make it. So I guess my question for you, maybe any of you who want to answer, is do you think that in Cayman and in Turks, the developers of these stratas are going to mandate that more and more are going to mandate that you must go through the rental pool if you want to rent your units out in order to keep their management companies solvent?
Well, as far as Turks is concerned, and my colleague Stephen touched on that this morning. Yeah, to a certain extent, depending on what which type of resort development or condo hotel concept that they're going to put in place. Like something like, for instance, example is Ritz. Ritz is going to be I haven't seen the strata bylaws for the Ritz as of yet, but I can only assume that Ritz is going to obviously be very protective of that because of the challenges that you said. They're going to want to make sure that the revenue that comes in, all the unit owners are going to put it in rental pool for Ritz, so they can obviously get as much of the rental pool coming back into the property. But what Stephen kind of hinted on was this could potentially create a different sort of investment opportunity for, say, somebody that wants to come in to develop a condo hotel, but give those persons now the option. With that framework in mind, and knowing that you have a management company to run the hotel, but maybe do so in a way that it can do that by getting a certain amount of revenue in, but at the same time allow those persons to be able to put their units on a VRBO or Airbnb. And if they can find that balance, I think that's a very attractive product that a developer of that nature can come in and do quite well in the Turks and Caicos, because there has been this shift from the traditional hotel to now people wanting to get access through Airbnb or VRBO, and also those persons that own that unit to have that flexibility as far as how they can rent their unit. Because there's no doubts about the fact that certain management companies that are in place obviously take a significant amount of the revenue that comes from those rentals because it has to pay for the amenities and such that are part of that hotel. So I don't know. It'd be interesting to see if a developer could come in with a certain product that allows persons to be able to rent their units on a short-term or vacation rental basis, but at the same time keep that hotel or resort successful. So I think that's a challenge, but I think that it would be a good one.
What do you think's happening in Cayman with that?
So there has been English case law that says the bylaws cannot mandate an individual to have to go through the on-site management. There's reasons why that strata owners want the one on-site management to handle the vacation rental. So there's consistency in the pricing, there's consistency in the service, there's consistency in the quality of the room. However, there's also individuals that maybe don't want to pay the, say, up to 30% of their gross rental income up in a fee, and they also might want some flexibility in price. So I know some condo owners that say 6 months out, they have the prices high, but then 6 weeks out, they drop down the price so they can have a high occupancy level. So I think it depends on the type of property, but I believe VRBO and HomeAway, those services are only going to be increasing in demand. So I believe that the stratas are going to have to be more flexible and allow for individuals to rent on their own if they wish.
And Jeff, what do you see in terms of this evolving ways of renting out properties, and in terms of the design, like for example, if you looked at Turks, and I know you've done some projects on some other islands too, like what types of designs for say for example condominium projects that are really geared towards investment more so than residents, what types of designs are working better? What do you see and why?
You're talking of commercial condominium hotel?
Yes.
It's built around two-bed units with a lock-off is really the core. That's what works. And then depending on the location, depending on the client, it will possibly change into upper-level penthouse type units are typical. Very few one-bed units in our marketplace, although you might have a few, would be the design baseline for us to start with.
Are the units getting smaller? Is the density getting higher? What's changing, if anything?
Well, the density, if I said recently, this is a couple of years, finally grew to the number that actually existed in the 80s. Very few people remember that, when it was 50 bedrooms per acre. Now it's 50 bedrooms per acre. Now the pressure changes to, in some ways, for clients who believe that you can build a condo hotel on 1 acre of land, particularly on North Shore, on Grace Bay. It's a whole new set of rules and design rules and regulations. It goes higher. Parking's always an issue. There's many underground parking facilities, condo hotels, all along Grace Bay, all the way to Leeward. So that's changing to different kinds of pressures on the people that live in the area, similarly to the H2O project. Does that answer your question?
I think so. I mean, Mark, you mentioned earlier the most recent project in Cayman. I think it's Watermark. This is an experienced developer who's done 5 or 6 at least projects in the past. If I'm not mistaken, this one differentiates from its predecessor a little bit in that it's just as large physically, but fewer units and larger units.
So 7 Mile Beach, the land is so incredibly valuable that they're increasing density in like the La Covia redevelopment, because that was only 3 floors, and now they're going to be doing 3 towers, each with 10 to 12 stories. But the Watermark is such a high-end luxury that it's going to be, I think, 60 units, 10 floors, priced between $6 to $22 million. A property like that does not allow vacation rentals. The minimum renting is for 1 month. That property is unique to Cayman, that it's going to be on both sides of the road, and it's going to have amenities like a restaurant and a spa, that both of those are open to the public. We haven't seen that before in a residential condominium. Obviously, you see that in resorts like the Ritz-Carlton and Kimpton and Weston. But we haven't seen that where a strata owns a restaurant and a strata owns a spa at a residential condo, like in Watermark there.
Yeah, the only other project I know of in Cayman that was like that, and I think it got legally challenged, was a good portion of the Ritz-Carlton development couldn't be rented short-term. And when you mentioned the Ritz-Carlton that's going up in Turks, I wondered if they were going to do some residential-only development as well, or if it's all rentable through the hotel.
I'm actually not sure. I think Sean or Ian can maybe speak to that.
Okay.
I think it's mostly, they'll still have the condo hotel concept. I'm not sure if there's any part of Ritz that's going to be
Purely residential.
Strictly residential.
Right, okay. In terms of, I know you have some experience obviously a lot of experience in the Bahamas as well. So just contrasting, in terms of the ability to do business, as a developer and as someone who wants to invest in real estate and perhaps rent it out. Can you tell us a little bit about the differences between Turks and the Bahamas and which is more favorable and why?
It's a difficult question.
I don't want to step on anyone's toes with this.
Yeah, I mean,
Everyone's
I'm wearing the two hats in the moment, and Gavin Christie, and I can see my Bahamian colleagues give me dagger eyes.
I'm sure
right
there's
now.
advantages to both, right?
Yes, I mean, there's pros and cons to both. I mean, I've mentioned briefly about the fact that I mean, the Bahamas itself is doing very well. They're going through similar to TCI. They are going through a residential boom. There's numerous developments going up. So there is as well as TCI. As far as the differences, I mean, I hinted on it before. There's a certain amount of extra red tape that you do have to go through as a foreigner buying in the Bahamas. Not necessarily, if it's your first house and you just intend to use it as your vacation home, then for the most part, it's very easy to do. If it's somebody that wants to do a resort development or something like that, or wants to buy a unit or something to rent, there's additional steps that you have to get approval from government in order to do so. I mean, it's not like they were refused to do it. It's just something you would have to get before you close on the purchase, just in case, worst case scenario, they say no. The Bahamas and Turks, as far as the differences are concerned, we touched on stamp duty a little bit. The Bahamas has stamp duty above $100,000 is 10%, whereas in Turks between $250,000 to $500,000, that's 8%. Above $500,000 is 10%. The Bahamas has property taxes. Turks and Caicos does not have any property taxes. I'm trying to think anything different. Oh, and of course, I think one of the advantages that TCI does have over the Bahamas is that TCI is US dollars. So whereas Bahamas is Bahamian dollars. So there is sometimes an extra step where we have to go, where the Bahamas, you have to get what they call exchange control approval. There are certain exchange control regulations that you have to deal with in the Bahamas that you don't have to worry about in the Turks and Caicos Islands. So as far as ease of doing business, I mean, I'd say as a foreigner coming in to maybe do resort development and that kind of thing, I would probably lean to say that it's maybe easier to do that and get the government approvals that you need to in the Turks and Caicos Islands as it is in the Bahamas. But that being said, Bahamas does have quite a significant amount of experience with large resorts and things like, for instance, like Baha Mar, Atlantis, where they are more experienced, I think, at dealing with resorts at that level. So I think that's pretty much the differences between the two jurisdictions as far as ease of doing business, maybe.
Okay, thank you. I asked somewhat of a similar question earlier this morning, but I'd like to get your take as well. I know maybe you have something to say about this, Jerry, in terms of what are you seeing in terms of occupancy rates and maybe rental returns on, say, condominium investments and private villas that are rented out? Are they providing a significant return, or I should say a sufficient return to investors and developers, and what sort of occupancy rates are tied to that?
I would say yes, but obviously the main thing, provided they are being managed well. Mm-hmm. So then you have to look at the two models. The condominium hotel, is that going to be a little bit more expensive and produce a little lesser return than a vacation home or a luxury villa investment? So it depends who's managing it and what the associated cost structure is. But I think that if your investment, be it a condominium or vacation home, luxury beachfront villa, whatever the case is, like if we kind of try and apply the model for ourselves that we look at getting you to 60% occupancy by year 3, and then we'd have financial targets on that basis, in line with the various rates and the property type. But if you're going to entice someone to invest money into property, and if we have to stand by it and produce a pro forma to say we think we can get you this, I mean, you have to then encourage your investor to go into property versus other different property types. So you can't just scribble a very attractive number here. You have to only write the number that you know you can deliver to, and as someone mentioned earlier on, in and around 8% is what you're looking for, but it takes a few years to get to that point. So really by year 3, 60%, and trying to hit that 8% number.
And that's
Or-
gross.
I have a comment. One thing I think people
8%
miss.
gross.
ROI, 8%.
Return
On your investment,
Net or gross?
net.
Net. Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
After expenses. Sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
One point people miss, I think it's a subtle thing, but a very important thing about Turks and Caicos. In 1996, when I designed Royal West Indies, phase 1 was 2 buildings, eventually 8 buildings completed. And the management company operated out of one of the 1-bedroom units on the ground floor, building 2. These are people from Canada who had never any experience. Contrast that to 3 days ago when I visited. We're doing, it's a double-edged thing. We're doing a refurbishment of that 20-year-old, 23-year-old project now to completely replace and redo all of the bathrooms in that facility. The point being that during that 20-year period, a place that started from zero in 1996, as Sean pointed out, there was nothing there, has managed somehow to build the capability with arguably not the greatest educational system, but when you walk through the door of the reception building at Royal West Indies, 8 buildings completed, mature vegetation, the sense is that you're in a very, very well-run hotel. And this, I think, is typical for Turks and Caicos. I think that's one of the strengths. It isn't so much the money anymore. It's the fact that what you bought 23 years ago is your place. And the people that you bought it from have managed somehow to go from maybe not 0, but 5 miles an hour, relatively speaking, to 100 miles an hour. Because to me, I hadn't been there in a long time. And it really impressed me. It was a very powerful impression. Similarly, a comment about the fact that these properties, which are 20 years old, 18, 20, 16, 25, including Ocean Club, I found out recently from the person that we work with for windows and doors, has instituted a refurbishment renovation program. This is Ocean Club East. They remove and replace every single window in two of those buildings every year in October. There's a challenge with occupancy when you want to do major renovation. It's basically September, October, and maybe into little November, and that's the only window that you have. So what's happened is there's a culture of high quality, and the fact of those condo hotels, especially Ocean Club, which was really the first one, having developed the ability to sustain quality, physical plant quality. To me, it's very impressive. I don't really have a lot of comparisons. I don't know about Barbados or Bahamas, but we're a new entity into the marketplace. But I haven't heard anyone today at any time use the word sustainability, which is overblown. I know that, but to me, there's many elements of sustainability. There are, by the way, I know of 3 arguably large enough Grace Bay parcels of land. Two are owned by clients of mine. The third one is not. That are, someone talked about private land. That's always not the most easily accessible land, but it's there. So there are options. There's a 35-acre lot parcel or series of parcels in Leeward that's just come on the market. So there's places to build.
Okay, and kind of coming back to the sort of returns that investors can get on rental units and villas and condominiums and things like that. We heard earlier that in the Bahamas, it's the influx of new traditional hotel rooms vis-a-vis Baha Mar, and we've got some other projects coming in, such as the Point in Nassau, new hotel projects, Margaritaville, I believe, and so we heard earlier that this has had a bit of a downward pressure effect on the rental market for villas and condominiums. In Turks and Caicos, the hotels that have been built up until recently have mostly been all-inclusive. Obviously, you had Club Med, and then you had beaches more recently. But now we have the Ritz-Carlton coming in, and I'm not sure what else is proposed. I think I've seen some other projects being proposed as well. I mean, do you think that this is going to have a similar negative effect? Is that going to present a challenge to the villa and condo rental market?
I think obviously it's going to increase competition, so everyone will be definitely watching it, watching it on rate, watching it on product offer. The only plus side you might say on that is if you look at the benefits of it, okay, it brings more people into the island, hopefully, but hopefully with increasing the number of rooms available, it will also encourage an increase in airlift to the island.
Yep.
So that would be a plus factor that would help everybody.
More of a critical mass, if you will. I think, that's what we're kind of seeing in Cayman is that a lot of people were asking me, we had the Kimpton going up, and then now we have a proposed Mandarin Oriental, and then Dart's eventually going to build what most of us believe to be a Four Seasons as well. And people are asking, is this going to cause a glut, too much inventory? But I think really critical mass is what it takes to bring in the airlift. I mean, we're already seeing, the airlines respond quite well, quite quickly to the increase in inventory in most of the islands. I mean, I read Caribbean Journal every day, and I think it's great what Alexander's doing, because he's always talking about what new airlift each of the islands get, and it's every day we're new flights, right, which is really good. Mm-hmm. I think both Turks and Cayman are well poised in terms of already having good airlift as it is. We have a new airport, and Provo had a new airport or renovation of the old one pretty recently. But so I mean, that's obviously a good thing. What else do you think is going to be driving growth in the rental market and investments going forward? And we'll kind of leave it there. Maybe each of you can give me your prognosis in terms of what you think is going to happen going forward.
For myself, if I start over here, just to add on all the pluses we've talked about earlier, but as people also indicated, 10 years ago, Turks and Caicos wasn't all that known. Now it's become a kind of a brand within itself. Turks and Caicos, Grace Bay itself has become a brand within itself. Long Bay is even, becoming a name that is well known out there. And it's essentially the power of media, be it social media, be it television, be it all the lovely Netflix shows. These guys in the fancy shows, if they need to throw in a name of where someone's going for the romantic weekend or something, they're gone to Turks, they're gone to here, they're gone to there. So I think as life progresses in this powerful social media and, let's say, ready visual world, that in itself is going to, empower all of the destinations and all their brands.
So as I mentioned earlier, with the construction sector increasing, basically between 7 and 8% over the last 3 years. The Cayman Islands is absolutely booming. So we're getting a new airport. We're getting a doubling of size of the Cayman Bay City Center. We're having an expansion of Health City, which has created the medical tourism field. We're having a multi-phase campus of Cayman Enterprise City, which is a special economic zone. We're having tons of residential condos, and these aren't just vacation condos. These are residential condos because, like I said, half the population are expats, and they're attorneys and they're lawyers, and they're looking for high-end residences to live in. So we have a lot of large-scale projects going on, which is going to help continue the economy for years to come. Our tourism has been through the roof. One thing I wanted to mention on occupancy rates, in our traditionally slower months of October and November, our hotels have actually been sold out, which is quite interesting. So basically, very bright futures for Cayman. We're already in a housing shortage. I don't believe the supply is going to satisfy the housing shortage. So it's a good time to be a realtor in Cayman, and a very bright future. And I hope you all can visit.
Jeff?
Well, I think if 2% of all the people that visit Ritz-Carlton and Hyatt Andaz decide to buy or invest in Turks and Caicos, there you have another element of sustainability. And one, you know, for those of us who live there, be very happy to have the travel numbers that mean that when Butch Stewart says he's going to close beaches, it won't matter. We'll still have the
You
airlift.
won't close it.
I'm just saying what it happens when even he says that in public. You know, it does have a ripple effect.
Yes.
But I think that Ritz will continue in its own way to create additional sustainability. Those people that travel and move out into the country, and you know, absolutely nothing against 7 Mile Beach, but we have one thing that is absolutely unique, which is the best system of beach access anywhere in the Caribbean. So one of the things that's residual from the very first planning, the very first Provident Limited plan for the 3,000 acres in the middle of Providenciales that dictated, I don't know how many there are, but there are at least a dozen, maybe 15, and those are protected. So a little kick.
Yeah, I really
Grant Cayman.
appreciate what you're saying, because when you know, for those of you who don't know it that well, there's a really nice dune buffer in Turks or in Provo between what's been built and the beach itself. It reminds me a lot of the Carolinas, going to the beach there when I was growing up. You know, you have this nice dune buffer, and so the distance is much greater, and as a result, from a environmental protection standpoint, I think that Turks is very well poised for potential environmental changes.
New
that may be
development,
happening.
150-foot setback,
Yeah.
which protects all of the natural sea oats. And
But one of the things they did really well when they planned is they put the road, at least in some cases, the road is far enough back that you can do that.
Exactly.
Whereas in 7 Mile Beach, unfortunately, the road isn't that far back, so we only have so much space to work with. So, Chris, what do you think is important?
Well, I think I'll echo what Jerry said. As far as social media is concerned, with the popularity of Instagram, I mean, just the fact that the Kardashians and the Beckhams love coming down to Turks and Caicos, that blows up obviously on social media anyway. So the name of Turks and Caicos is out there now. People know where it is. And it's obviously becoming a very popular name for islands in the Caribbean. I mean, the other fact is, we mentioned before, Ritz-Carlton coming in is also, I think, a big thing for the Turks and Caicos. It is really the only large brand name of resort that Turks has had down there. There is also discussions that Andaz Hyatt is coming in. They haven't broken ground yet, but that's what they say. But we know Ritz is online, is coming. They're doing construction right now. So, and Ritz being that it has such a huge following as far as the Marriott brand is concerned, I think for the most part that is going to create a lot of, once again, a lot of exposure for the islands, and that I think in turn will increase the airlift coming in to the point we may have to start discussing even putting another new airport in, even though we just did one. So it's going to be an interesting time in the next 5 years, I think, with Turks and Caicos and all.
Well, you heard it here, folks. It's all optimism up here on the stage. Do you guys have any questions for our panelists? Would you like to get involved in the conversation? Come up and speak. There he is.
Thanks. Yeah, I have kind of more of a macro view of everything, which is equally optimistic, I think. if you have to looking geographically, different regions. Obviously, we're looking a little more at the northwest of the Caribbean. Different regions are doing well for different reasons. I think even in the wake of the hurricanes, there's very few islands that have not really seen some level of recovery. And I think the best thing is, as we thought, and I think people realize, like the consumer forgets pretty quickly about a hurricane unless you remind them, which I think some tourist boards have been doing wrongly, but most people don't even remember that there was a hurricane a year and a half ago. See, I'm reminding people, which is stupid right now too, right? But I think in the Eastern Caribbean, which is really for me one of the hottest sectors of the Caribbean right now, a lot of the growth is fueled by these citizenship by investment programs. If you look in countries like Dominica, St. Lucia, Antigua, St. Kitts and Nevis, James was saying every week it seems like there's a new hotel project that we write about, because in many cases there really is. And the vast majority of those are typically residential resorts that are hotels with a separate real estate component, or like Turks and Caicos style condo hotel where the residences are sold and they're all put into the rental pool. And I think you see that driving a lot of growth. And then universally, airlift is just growing exponentially. Either you see a new airport every month being built or being proposed. I was in Cayman last week. They just opened their new airport, which is beautiful. St. Vincent and the Grenadines, which for decades was almost inaccessible. You had to fly through Barbados to get there. They opened a new airport, which is now you'll start to see hotels there that couldn't have existed before. So I think that'll be the challenge going forward, is how do you have all these seats now? Can you satisfy that demand? The airlines have shown they're not going to stay if you can't keep those rooms. But I think it's very exciting what's happening. Tourism generally has been up. I think occupancy is slowly creeping up. It hasn't really been pacing with that growth yet, but we had a few years, obviously the hurricane hurt that a lot. But you're starting to see occupancy creep up finally now in 2019. And it's just, I think it's all good things for the Caribbean. So, if anyone has any questions, we cover a lot of different things, so happy to.
I'm Nick from New York. I'm a private equity group. We're actually the architect of Scope that put financial structure together. I've been listening to you guys for past 45 minutes talk about development here. And as a lead architect, you talk about sustainability. Do you guys all realize there's $8 trillion in the World Bank for sustainability that helps subsidize development for all of your countries? Was signed by 167 countries, executed by Joe Biden before President Trump got in. If you can prove that your building is -0 based in non-production carbon footprint for the next 99 years, you can take the calculation to Morgan Stanley, who will create that into a green gold certificate and sell it to McDonald's or Starbucks to help you offset. And I understand development very well as a financial guy. I'm looking at that. You love talking about development. What about the local people? What about the local people who live there? Are we ever going to do anything to support them? Sustainability is a circular economy. We got to stop doing a linear economy. And all I'm hearing here, I'm not impressed with it at all. Can you please, as an architect, do the research and help us get this free money? China took 4.6 trillion. There's still 8 trillion in escrow. You guys looking for money? It's free money. Please look that up on the World Bank Infodep and help the local people get into your development. Stop looking for the super rich. I can underwrite that funding. I can help with that. We partner with the global leader of the broker-dealer and financial institution want to give you money. Give us the structure, we'll underwrite it for you. Help the local people. Stop with the rich. Please look into that structure. Thanks. I'm right here. My card. Come and see me.
It's actually an interesting topic, because it's something, obviously, when you write about tourism and go to conferences and talk about real estate and tourism, you get that all the time. I think people, even in the Caribbean, forget that it's, tourism and real estate is the largest industry by far in the Caribbean. Most industries that work with tourism are, relying on tourism to exist. A lot of the law firms and a lot of the architects and the farmers and everybody rely on it. And so I think we always try and spread this message of how important it is, especially in a region without natural resources. Creating a new hotel project, a real estate project, puts people to work, creates jobs that could never have existed in many ways. So I think it's important to remember that as well.
We could also mention in regards to green buildings, I believe one of our new commercial buildings was the first LEED certified commercial building in the Caribbean that DART did in Camana Bay. LEED Gold, okay, so just what we were speaking about. So once again, a very wealthy billionaire, probably didn't even pay for that. Maybe he got some of that fund money.
Yeah, I mean, I think you see that green energy trend being even used as an amenity to both to get people to stay at a hotel and to buy. Not to mention the fact that when you're living in a region where sun and wind are pretty abundant, it makes sense in the long term anyway.
Yeah, in regards, our electric bills are very expensive in Cayman. So two things that we use, of course, solar is quite popular, but we also use geothermal mainly for our AC. So that's quite effective as well. That's being utilized in the new airport.
Yeah.
Geothermal.
Any other questions? No? Going once, going twice? Again, I want to thank Gina and Ian and everyone else with the agency for having us and for inviting me. I really appreciate the opportunity. And give a round of applause to our panelists as well, and to the agency for doing a great job putting this event